How far would you go to protect the only friend you have left in the world? On a storm-soaked night in Cedar Falls, Missouri, Officer Janet Miller found a sight that would haunt her forever. A barefoot little girl, no older than 3, clutching a battered German shepherd under a dying oak, both of them shaking from cold and fear. No one knew her name, and the dog looked like he'd survived a war. But the bond between them was unbreakable. Tonight's story isn't just about survival. It's about trust, resilience, and the quiet power of loyalty. If you believe in second chances and the healing bond between humans and animals, give this video a like. And if you want to join us for more true stories that restore your faith and kindness, hit subscribe and be part of our community. Stay with us. Because sometimes, the bravest hearts come in small packages, and the storm is only the beginning. Lightning sliced the sky above Cedar Falls, Missouri, painting the old brick buildings and cracked sidewalks in quick, blue flashes. The rain hammered rooftops and pooled in the gutters, overflowing until the streets shimmered beneath the storm. On nights like these, most folks stayed inside. Doors bolted, lights dimmed, radios humming low as they waited for the storm to pass. But for Officer Janet Miller, the work didn't stop for thunder or rain. She'd been called out to the edge of town, to an address people whispered about but rarely visited. As her squad car pulled up to the abandoned Harris house, Janet's headlights swept across the wild, overgrown yard. Windows gaped black and broken, the porch sagged, and every shadow seemed alive. But it was the small shape on the edge of the property that stopped her heart. A barefoot child, hunched against the trunk of a dying oak, her thin arms wrapped around the thick neck of a German shepherd. The dog stood stiff-legged, hackles raised, growling low in the back of his throat as Janet stepped out, badge glinting in the rain. "Hey there!" Janet kept her voice steady, gentle, even as her mind raced. The dispatcher had said a neighbor spotted a little girl alone with a dog, no adults, just after midnight. But nothing in her training prepared her for the sight of this child. Hair plastered to her cheeks, nightgown torn, feet muddy and bleeding. She was no older than 3. The dog, massive, scarred, fur slicked to his body, looked like he'd stepped out of a war zone. Janet squatted a few feet away, hands open, letting the rain drench her uniform. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here to help." The child's eyes were impossibly wide, fixed on Janet but somehow looking right through her. She didn't move, didn't cry. She just clung to the dog's collar as if it was the only thing keeping her tethered to this world. The dog snapped his jaws at Janet's approach, a warning that meant business. He shifted, positioning himself between the girl and the officer. Janet paused. She recognized the look, fierce loyalty mixed with pure fear. Something terrible had happened here. It took nearly an hour, backup lights flashing blue across the overgrown grass, before Janet coaxed the girl to her feet, mostly by speaking softly to the dog. "Easy, boy. Good dog. You're protecting her, aren't you?" When she finally reached them, the girl trembled but didn't pull away. Janet wrapped her jacket around the child and gently led her and the dog to the patrol car. The shepherd pressed so close to the child's leg, Janet wondered if the two would ever separate. Inside the station, the buzz was immediate. Officers, nurses, the lone town doctor, they all gathered, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The storm's fury rattled the windows, but inside the air was hushed, brittle with tension. The girl sat, clutching the dog's collar so tightly her knuckles turned white. She hadn't spoken a single word, not when the nurse offered her a cookie, not when the doctor examined the raw scrapes on her feet, not even when her name was asked. She only flinched when anyone but the dog came near. Max, the shepherd, someone found a tag on his collar, never took his eyes off her. He bared his teeth at anyone who got too close, a deep, chesty bark reverberating off the walls. The doctor, an older man with kind eyes, noted the bruises on Emma's arms, old, yellowing, and new ones, angry purple. He pulled Janet aside. "She's been hurt, more than once by the look of it." He pointed at Max's side, where a jagged scar stood out against his black and tan coat. "And so has he." As the hours ticked by, rumors started to ripple through the station and out into the streets. Folks who'd seen Emma and her late mother at the grocery store wondered what had happened since her mom's passing. Some whispered about Emma's stepfather, Wayne Fletcher, a man with a temper and a drinking problem. Others remembered the Harris family, how Emma's uncle, Daniel, had gone off to serve overseas and never come home. But no one could explain the bond between the silent child and the battered dog. The sheriff wondered aloud if Max was dangerous. The social worker hesitated, saying dogs shouldn't be near traumatized children. But Janet saw something different. A lifeline, not a threat. All night, Janet watched from her desk as Emma sat on the hard plastic chair, knees tucked to her chest, Max's huge head resting in her lap. Thunder shook the glass, but the girl didn't flinch. Not once. Only when someone tried to separate them did Emma's grip tighten and Max's growl deepen, a sound so full of warning that even the bravest officers stepped back. No matter what questions were asked, Emma gave no answers. She just stared at the wall, her small fingers twisting the dog's tag, as if the answers were locked away in the silent space between heartbeats. And Max, wounded and wary, never once let her out of his sight. By dawn, as the storm faded and Cedar Falls blinked awake to a new day, one thing was clear. Whatever had happened in that dark house, whatever secrets Emma held tight behind her silence, she would only let Max carry them with her. And if anyone wanted to help that little girl, they'd have to earn the trust of a dog who'd seen more darkness than any animal ever should. The morning sun crept reluctantly through heavy clouds, bathing Cedar Falls in a hesitant gray light. At the small-town police station, the mood was no brighter. Emma sat motionless, still clutching Max's collar as though she might vanish if she let go. Officers whispered in the hall, and coffee sat cold in paper cups. The room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for someone to make the next move. Janet Miller stood at the window, watching drops of rain snake down the glass. She had called Child Protective Services at dawn, but part of her wished she hadn't. Experience told her that the system wasn't always kind, especially to kids like Emma. Children with haunted eyes and secrets too heavy for words. But law was law, and Janet knew Emma couldn't stay at the station forever. The social worker, Karen Wells, arrived with a stack of forms and a gentle voice. She knelt down to Emma's level, keeping her distance, and spoke in careful, measured tones. "Emma, sweetheart, I'm here to help you find a safe place. Would you like to come with me?" Emma stared straight through her, silent as ever. Max pressed closer, sensing her fear, emitting a low, uneasy whine. Janet knelt beside Emma and placed a reassuring hand on Max's broad shoulder. "Karen's okay, kiddo, but you two need somewhere safe to stay tonight." The moment Karen reached out, Max let out a sharp, guttural bark that froze everyone in the room. Karen recoiled, face pale. Emma clung tighter to the dog's ruff. After a tense debate, Karen made the call. "She can't go to a shelter tonight. Too many people, too much chaos. I know someone, Melissa Barnes. She's fostered before and she's good with kids who need extra care. I'll call her." Melissa Barnes was a gentle-faced woman in her late 40s, with streaks of gray in her braid and the kind of steady patience that comes from years of teaching kindergarten. She arrived within the hour, bringing warm blankets, a thermos of hot cocoa, and her own battered station wagon. "You must be Emma," she said softly, kneeling to meet the girl's gaze. "It's okay, honey. Max can come with us. No one's gonna take him away." For the first time, a flicker of hope crossed Emma's face. Convincing the authorities to let Max go was another story. Animal control wanted to separate the pair. Protocol, they insisted. Janet stood her ground. "You didn't see her in the rain. That dog's all she's got. I'll vouch for him." She signed the paperwork herself, knowing full well she'd answer for it later. Melissa drove Emma and Max to her cozy house on Maple Street, a home filled with the scent of cinnamon, books, and faded memories. Emma wouldn't let go of Max's collar for the entire ride, refusing even the cookies Melissa offered. When they arrived, Max sniffed every inch of the house, his body tense, eyes always returning to Emma. That first night was rough. Emma wouldn't eat, barely sipped the cocoa, and refused to sleep unless Max curled beside her on the bed. Melissa, remembering her own son's restless nights after her husband's death, left the door ajar and a soft lamp burning in the hall. She sat in the next room, listening to Emma's muffled sobs and Max's gentle whines, feeling the weight of grief and fear hang in the air. Meanwhile, the town buzzed with rumors. The news spread fast in Cedar Falls. Emma Harris, found with a battered German shepherd, her stepfather nowhere to be seen. At the local diner, folks debated what should happen next. Some called Max a hero. Others muttered about dangerous dogs and whispered about Emma's home life. The details grew wilder with each retelling. Had Wayne Fletcher run off? Had he hurt Emma? Why did the dog look like he'd been in a fight for his life? The real answers remained locked away in Emma's silence. On the second night, the fragile calm shattered. Melissa was cleaning up after dinner when the doorbell rang. Once, twice, then a pounding so loud the plates rattled in the sink. Max shot to his feet, body rigid, hackles up. Emma froze in the doorway, panic flooding her eyes. Melissa peered through the window and felt her heart drop. Wayne Fletcher stood on the porch, wild-eyed, rain-soaked, fists clenched at his sides. "Open up! I'm here for my stepdaughter!" he shouted, voice slurred with rage and whiskey. Melissa grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. "Stay in your room, Emma. Take Max, now!" she hissed. Wayne pounded harder. "I know she's in there. She's my family, and that mutt is mine too." Inside, Emma pressed herself against the bedroom wall, Max standing between her and the door. When Wayne forced his way through the unlocked back door, Max exploded from the hallway, a snarling, flashing blur of teeth and fur. He planted himself between Emma and Wayne, barking with such ferocity that Wayne reeled backward, crashing into a coat rack. The commotion woke the neighbors, who rushed to their windows. Melissa shouted from the stairs, "The police are on their way!" Wayne, cursing and shaking, tried to shove past Max, but the dog lunged, jaws snapping inches from his leg. Wayne stumbled out the back, vanishing into the rain just as sirens blared down Maple Street. Police arrived minutes later, flashlights sweeping the yard, radios crackling. Janet Miller herself pulled up, rushing to Emma's side. The girl was shaking but unharmed, buried in Max's fur. Melissa hugged her close, whispering, "It's over, honey. You're safe now." That night, the story of Max the German Shepherd took on a new life. He wasn't just a battered stray. He was a guardian, a survivor, and the only one Emma trusted to keep the darkness at bay. But everyone knew the storm wasn't over. Wayne was still out there, and Emma's nightmares had only just begun. For the next week, Melissa's cozy house became both a shelter and a battleground, a place where shadows from the past fought with every attempt at comfort. Emma still hadn't spoken a word. She floated through the days like a ghost, her small hand always gripping Max's collar or his thick fur, as if afraid the world would swallow her up if she let go. Every time the phone rang or footsteps sounded on the porch, she flinched. And every time Max was there, a living, breathing wall between her and whatever came next. Melissa tried everything she knew. She made pancakes shaped like animals, read aloud from old picture books, put on gentle music, and opened all the curtains to let in the soft June sun. But nothing worked unless Max was by Emma's side. When Melissa suggested Max take a nap in the yard, Emma's face twisted in panic, and the dog barked so sharply even Melissa's nerves rattled. That night she lay awake, listening to Emma's stifled cries, the steady thump of Max's tail as he tried to comfort her, and she wondered how much hurt a child could hold before something broke for good. Emma didn't speak, but she found ways to communicate. She began to draw. At first, the pictures were shaky, just lines and circles. But soon, shapes appeared. A house, a dark figure, the outline of a dog with a star-shaped scar. She pushed these drawings under Melissa's door each morning, as if hoping someone could decipher the maze in her mind. Melissa started saving them, taping the more hopeful ones, flowers, suns, smiling dogs, on the fridge. Max had his own scars. He would sleep at the foot of Emma's bed, only to bolt upright in the middle of the night, whimpering and pawing at the air. Sometimes he would whine and press his face against the wall, trembling so hard his whole body shook. Melissa found him one morning, teeth bared at nothing, a haunted look in his eyes. She reached down to soothe him, fingers tracing a faint tattoo on his ear, USF K9. Something clicked in her memory. This was no ordinary stray. Max had served. Determined to learn more, Melissa called the local veterans group. They put her in touch with Officer Janet Miller, who, after a little digging, found Max's old service record. He'd belonged to Staff Sergeant Daniel Harris, Emma's uncle, who'd been killed overseas 2 years earlier. Daniel had left Max behind in the care of his sister, Emma's mother. When Emma's mother passed away, everything went downhill. Wayne, the stepfather, took over, and that's when the neighbors started hearing the yelling and seeing Emma's bruises. Max, the soldier's dog, had seen war. He'd survived it, and now, somehow, he was fighting a different kind of battle in a small Missouri town. Melissa brought the news to Emma carefully, kneeling by her as she drew. Max belonged to your uncle, Daniel. He was a hero, just like Max is for you. Emma looked up, eyes shining for a brief second, then nodded. She picked up a crayon and drew a medal, hanging from Max's collar. The days crept by in slow, cautious steps. Melissa and Janet worked with Karen Wells, the social worker, to get Emma into therapy. Emma refused to talk to the therapist, but she would sit on the floor with Max and scribble in her notebook. Sometimes she'd draw shadows, large and looming, with Max standing between them and a small figure in a pink dress. The therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Lillian Pratt, learned to read these drawings like stories. She's telling us more than words ever could, Lillian explained to Melissa after one session. Max is her protector, her safe place. But Max had his own wounds. One night, Emma awoke to his frantic barking, louder, wilder than before. She ran to find him clawing at the back door, eyes wild, foam flecking his lips. It took both Melissa and Emma to calm him down. That night, Emma crept into Melissa's room, Max trailing behind. She crawled under the quilt, wordless but no longer alone. Melissa wrapped an arm around her, and for the first time Emma slept through the night. The town, meanwhile, was divided. Some people called to check on Emma and dropped off casseroles and stuffed animals. Others questioned why Max hadn't been put down after the incident with Wayne. "That dog's a risk," one neighbor complained at the market. But others remembered the stories about Daniel Harris's loyal K9. Rumors tangled with truth until no one could separate the two. It was Janet Miller who kept the storm at bay. She visited almost daily, checking on Emma, bringing treats for Max, and gently asking questions. Sometimes, Emma would hand Janet a drawing, one of her standing in sunlight with Max, or another of a dark house with the dog's body blocking the door. "You're very brave," Janet would say. Max is too. Slowly, the outlines of Emma's story began to emerge. A house filled with yelling, the heavy thud of boots, nights spent cowering under the bed while Max pressed close, shielding her. The night they escaped, Max had dragged her out the back door, barking and snarling as Wayne shouted behind them. Emma didn't remember the rain or the cold, only the sound of Max's heartbeat beneath her ear. With each new drawing, Emma revealed another piece of herself, and with each piece Melissa felt the wall between them shrink. She knew healing wouldn't come fast, but she was beginning to believe for the first time that it might come at all. Sleep rarely came easy in Melissa Barnes's house these days. Some nights Emma would wake with a gasp, tiny fists clutching at the air, eyes wide with the memory of things she couldn't say out loud. Each time Max would sense her fear, climbing up beside her, his heavy head pressing against her chest, heart beating slow and steady, anchoring her to the present, pulling her back from the brink of panic. In those long, shadowy hours, Melissa would sit quietly at the doorway, watching the unlikely pair, a traumatized child and a scarred, loyal dog, finding peace only in each other's presence. The nightmares left Emma trembling and silent. One morning, after a particularly rough night, Melissa found her curled up on the kitchen floor, crayon clutched in hand, eyes distant and ringed with exhaustion. Max was sprawled out beside her, eyelids drooping. Melissa sat down beside them, gently stroking Emma's hair. "You're safe here, honey. You and Max both." Emma's response was to reach out and rest her hand on Max's paw, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Melissa understood pain and loss more than most. Her husband Dave had died suddenly 5 years ago, and the house still echoed with the emptiness he'd left behind. It was the reason she opened her doors to foster children in the first place, to try to fill the silence with laughter, or at least with hope. But Emma's sorrow was different. It was heavy, raw, and slow to heal. Sometimes Melissa would catch herself staring at the girl, feeling a fierce, protective ache rise in her chest. She wanted to take the pain away, but all she could do was offer patience, love, and the warmth of a home that would never turn her away. Word of Emma and Max's ordeal spread quickly through Cedar Falls. At the local church, Pastor Raymond began organizing fundraisers to help cover therapy bills and groceries. He invited Melissa and Emma to Sunday service, promising a safe space and gentle company. The Veterans Group, learning about Max's military background, donated a year's supply of dog food and sent a team to help build a new fence for the backyard. Casseroles, hand-knitted blankets, and cards with hand-scrawled prayers arrived at Melissa's door, each one a small token of the town's empathy. For every gesture, Melissa sent back a thank you note, wanting the world to know just how much it mattered. But kindness and concern weren't universal. Some neighbors grumbled about a dangerous dog living near children. "What if he snaps?" they whispered at the grocery store. "He's already attacked one man." Others questioned whether Emma was safe anywhere, or if she'd ever really recover. Melissa heard the murmurs and tried not to let them show, but the words weighed on her. She worried every time someone gave Max a wary look, or when a group of mothers crossed the street to avoid her yard. It was Karen Wells, the social worker, who noticed something remarkable. During one of her visits, she brought Emma a coloring book and sat quietly in the living room, taking notes as the girl played on the rug. Emma remained withdrawn until Max wandered in and plopped down beside her, tongue lolling, brown eyes soft and gentle. As soon as Max settled, Emma's posture changed. She relaxed, shoulders dropping, lips curving in the faintest of smiles. Karen jotted something down. "She only really lights up when he's around," she told Melissa afterward. "It's more than comfort. It's a lifeline." Determined to help, Karen arranged for Emma to meet with a therapy animal specialist. The therapist, Dr. Hawkins, watched as Emma's hand crept toward Max, fingers tangling in his fur. "You see the way she looks at him? That's trust. It's rare in trauma cases this severe." He suggested enrolling Max in an official therapy dog program, a controversial idea given Max's history, but one that could make all the difference for Emma. The community's debate became more intense. At a town meeting, heated voices filled the room. "That dog saved her life," someone shouted. "But what about the next time? What if he bites a kid?" another countered. Pastor Raymond stood and spoke quietly. "Sometimes, the ones who need the most forgiveness are the ones who have already given everything. We can't just turn our backs." Meanwhile, Melissa wrestled with Emma's ongoing night terrors. Some nights, she'd find Emma huddled in the hallway, knees to her chest, whispering to Max in a voice too faint for anyone else to hear. Other times, Emma would draw the same image over and over. Herself and Max, standing at the threshold of a dark house, light pouring from the doorway, shadows shrinking behind them. Each time the dog was larger, more heroic, as if Max had grown powerful enough to banish every demon Emma faced. One afternoon, after a particularly rough therapy session, Melissa drove Emma and Max to the park. Children played on the swings, their laughter bright in the summer air. Emma hung back at the edge, clutching Max's leash. Slowly, with Max nudging her forward, Emma took a step toward the sandbox. Another child, a little boy with a mop of curly hair, noticed her and waved. For a moment, Emma hesitated. Then, in a small act of bravery, she waved back. Max's tail wagged, thumping the ground. The moment was fleeting, but it mattered. Each tiny victory, each smile, each gentle touch, each step outside, marked the slow return of trust. And every time doubt crept in, Melissa remembered the night Emma arrived, rain-soaked and silent, with Max at her side. She thought of how far they'd come, and how much further they still had to go. In the safety of their new world, Emma and Max were learning to live again, one fragile moment at a time. And Cedar Falls, for all its fears and failings, was beginning to see that sometimes healing starts with a single, steadfast friend, and the courage to believe in second chances. Summer faded slowly in Cedar Falls, the heavy air tinged with the scent of cut grass and distant rain. At Melissa's house, days passed in a careful rhythm. Emma woke, always with Max curled beside her, and together they faced another round of doctor visits, therapy appointments, and guarded attempts at normal life. But even as Emma and Max began to heal, the shadows of their past refused to let go. Officer Janet Miller, still haunted by the memory of that stormy night, refused to drop the case. Each morning, she sifted through the files stacked on her desk. Police reports, hospital records, statements from neighbors. Patterns began to emerge. Incidents of loud shouting, glimpses of bruises, a child's cry overheard behind closed doors. The name Wayne Fletcher came up over and over. Janet's gut told her this was no ordinary domestic case. Digging deeper, Janet checked Wayne's record, and what she found chilled her. There were previous charges for assault, a dismissed case involving Emma's late mother, and a recent traffic stop where Wayne had been found with a suspicious amount of cash and unmarked pill bottles. It didn't add up to a full picture, but it suggested more than grief or stress. Janet suspected Wayne was involved in things that reached far beyond the Harris house. Meanwhile, Melissa worked tirelessly to create an environment where Emma could finally feel safe enough to let go. She hung Emma's newest drawings all over the living room and bought Max a new bed, but it was clear that both the girl and the dog still lived with invisible wounds. At night, Melissa would find Emma staring out the window, Max pressed so close that the glass fogged with his breath. It was during one of Dr. Pratt's art therapy sessions that a new piece of the puzzle surfaced. Emma drew a series of pictures, some in dark colors, some with heavy, frantic lines. In one, a large, angry figure loomed over a smaller figure with pigtails. Max stood between them, teeth bared. Another showed Emma's mother on the floor, and Wayne's face twisted with rage. But it was the last drawing that broke everyone's heart. A door, slightly open, with Emma and Max slipping away into the rainy night. Dr. Pratt studied the images carefully. She's remembering more. The trauma is still raw, but these drawings are helping her process what happened. Melissa listened quietly, rage and sorrow warring inside her. She wished she could reach back through time and snatch Emma away before any of this had happened. As the investigation ramped up, Janet reached out to the local veterans group again. She wanted to know more about Max's military history, why a decorated service dog had ended up in such a tragic place. That's when she heard from Jack Turner, a friend of Daniel Harris, and a fellow veteran who had served with Max overseas. Jack arrived at Melissa's house one muggy afternoon, carrying an envelope of old photographs and a battered military ID. Max's ears perked up immediately at the sound of Jack's voice. The man dropped to one knee, and Max, for the first time in weeks, wagged his tail. Just a little, but enough for Jack's face to soften with relief. "Hey, buddy. It's been a long time." Jack ruffled Max's fur, then looked up at Emma, his eyes gentle. "You're safe now, kiddo. He's a good dog, one of the best I ever knew." Sitting at the kitchen table, Jack told Melissa and Officer Miller about Max's service. He saved lives overseas, detected bombs, found lost soldiers, even pulled me out from under a collapsed wall once. Jack's tone grew solemn. Max was Daniel's partner. When Daniel died, the dog changed, but he never stopped protecting the ones he loved. Jack's presence seemed to reassure both Emma and Max. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to draw something new. Max in a uniform, metal shining, Daniel at his side, both of them standing tall in the sun. Melissa taped it above Emma's bed, a small monument to hope. But safety remained fragile. Wayne Fletcher was still missing, and rumors swirled through Cedar Falls. Some said he'd left the state. Others claimed he'd been seen lurking near the highway. Police patrols increased in the neighborhood. Melissa kept the doors locked and never let Emma and Max outside alone. Then, one evening, everything changed. Melissa had just tucked Emma into bed when Max shot up, ears flat against his head, teeth flashing. A shadow crossed the backyard, then the telltale creak of the side gate. Max growled, low and savage. Melissa grabbed her phone and dialed Janet, voice shaking. Suddenly, Wayne's face appeared at the kitchen window, eyes wild, mouth twisted into a sneer. He pounded on the glass, shouting, "Give me my family back!" Max launched at the door, barking so loudly the whole block must have heard. Emma bolted upright in bed, her scream silent but desperate. Melissa yelled, "Get away from here, Wayne! The police are coming!" Wayne tried to force his way inside, but Max wedged himself in the doorway, his massive body a living shield. The dog didn't hesitate. He barked, snapped, and refused to move. Neighbors flicked on porch lights, and someone shouted for help. Wayne, spooked, disappeared into the night just as sirens wailed in the distance. Janet and her team arrived minutes later, sweeping the yard with flashlights, weapons drawn. Emma clung to Max, her tiny body shaking. Janet wrapped her in a blanket, whispering, "You're safe. We won't let him hurt you again." The incident made headlines the next morning. Cedar Falls was divided. Some hailed Max as a hero, while others renewed calls for him to be removed from the home. Melissa ignored the noise. She saw the truth in Emma's eyes. Trust, fierce and fragile, still burning in the darkness. And she knew, with every ounce of her being, that they would fight for that trust, no matter what it cost. The sense of safety at Melissa's home became more fragile with each passing night. Emma slept lightly, often in Max's protective shadow, and Melissa kept her phone within arm's reach. Despite police patrols circling the block, fear lingered like a storm cloud. Wayne was still out there somewhere, and it felt like the whole house was waiting for the other shoe to drop. That unease finally cracked one muggy night in late August. The air was heavy and still, so thick that even the crickets seemed tired. Melissa had tucked Emma in after reading a bedtime story. Max curled at the foot of the bed, his ears twitching with every sound from outside. Emma pressed her face into his fur, breathing in the familiar scent of safety. She didn't want to admit it, but she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could finally sleep without being afraid. Downstairs, Melissa paced the living room, unable to relax. She replayed the events of the last few weeks in her mind. The break-in attempt, the town's heated debate over Max, the neighbors who still crossed the street to avoid her yard. She checked each lock, tested the windows, and left a baseball bat propped by the front door, just in case. At midnight, as the clock chimed softly, everything shattered. A window in the kitchen broke with a sudden, sickening crash. Melissa's heart seized. She raced toward the sound, grabbing her phone and dialing 911 with shaking hands. Before she could speak, the line went dead. A heavy boot had ripped the cord from the wall. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, rough and determined. Upstairs, Max bolted upright, his body vibrating with tension. Emma whimpered, fear rooting her to the mattress, but Max nudged her gently, then stood between her and the door, hackles raised, a low, menacing growl rumbling from his chest. Downstairs, Melissa screamed, "Emma, stay with Max, don't move!" The next moments blurred into chaos. Wayne Fletcher, wild-eyed, dirty, and desperate, stormed up the stairs, bellowing Emma's name. "Come here, you little brat! You're coming with me, whether you like it or not!" Emma shrank into the headboard, her body trembling. Max placed himself in front of her, teeth bared. Wayne flung open the bedroom door, the frame splintering from the force. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Wayne's breath heaving, Emma frozen with terror, Max standing like a sentry carved from stone. Wayne lunged. "Move, mutt!" he snarled, swinging a heavy flashlight at Max's head. But Max dodged with the reflexes of a trained protector, snapping at Wayne's wrist. The man howled in pain as Max's teeth grazed his arm, drawing blood. Wayne tried to shove past, but Max refused to yield, barking so furiously the windows shook. Emma covered her ears, rocking back and forth, eyes shut tight. Downstairs, Melissa grabbed her bat and raced up the stairs, adrenaline burning away her fear. She burst into the room to see Wayne, bleeding, furious, locked in a standoff with Max. "Leave her alone!" Melissa shouted, swinging the bat at Wayne's back. He dodged, turning on her with a snarl, Stay out of this. She's mine. Max seized the opportunity, lunging at Wayne's leg, clamping down just enough to force the man to stumble backward. Wayne crashed into the wall, knocking a framed photo to the floor. Emma let out a strangled cry as Wayne, desperate and enraged, reached for her arm. Suddenly, Officer Janet Miller's voice rang through the chaos. "Police, don't move!" Flashlights blazed in the hallway. Behind Janet, Jack Turner appeared, face grim, weapon drawn. "Step away from the girl, Wayne," Janet commanded, her voice like iron. Wayne hesitated, eyes darting between the dog, the police, and the window. But Max wouldn't back down. He stood his ground, every muscle rigid, teeth bared, protecting Emma as if she were his own. Melissa, bat still raised, shielded Emma with her body. For a moment, the entire world shrank to the tiny, crowded room. Fear, fury, and determination colliding. Wayne tried one last, desperate charge. He lunged at Emma, but Max intercepted him with a ferocious snarl. There was a brief, brutal struggle. Wayne's fist slammed into Max's side, but the dog held fast, refusing to let go. Blood stained the carpet. Janet and Jack moved in fast, wrestling Wayne to the floor, cuffing him as he screamed and thrashed. "Get him out of here!" Melissa cried, tears streaming down her face. Janet nodded, her jaw set. "It's over," she said softly, stroking Emma's hair. "He can't hurt you anymore." Max limped away from the fight, a deep gash on his side leaking blood. Emma sobbed, collapsing against him, hands searching for injuries. Melissa knelt beside them, pressing a towel to Max's wound. "Hold on, boy. You did it. You saved her." Within minutes, EMTs arrived, bandaging Max and checking Emma for injuries. Neighbors filled the lawn, watching as police hauled Wayne Fletcher away in handcuffs. The house pulsed with relief and exhaustion. That night, local news vans lined the street, lights flashing, reporters eager for the story of the heroic dog who had saved a child's life. Headlines blazed across Cedar Falls by morning. War hero dog stops child's abduction. Brave German shepherd protects girl from abusive stepfather. The phone rang off the hook with messages of support, and a few more warnings about Max's dangerous nature. But inside Melissa's house, all that mattered was that Emma was safe. She slept that night with her arms wrapped around Max, her breath slowing, the terrible dreams kept at bay by the warmth of her protector. Melissa sat nearby, a hand resting on Max's flank, whispering her gratitude. Janet and Jack stayed late, finishing their reports and drinking bitter coffee at the kitchen table, the weight of the ordeal pressing on them all. As dawn painted Cedar Falls in pale gold, it was clear that nothing would ever be the same. The scars of violence and fear lingered, but hope, tattered, stubborn, and fierce, had survived. And at the center of it all, a silent child and a battered dog clung to each other. Proof that sometimes love and loyalty can stand against even the darkest storms. In the days following Wayne's arrest, the atmosphere in Cedar Falls shifted from fear to hope, though a wary tension remained. News of the violent confrontation at Melissa's home spread fast. Everyone in town knew how Max, bloodied but unbroken, had stood his ground to protect Emma. While some locals still argued over whether a dangerous dog should be near children, more and more people brought casseroles, cards, and homemade treats to Melissa's porch, leaving notes that read, "Thank you, Max, and stay strong, Emma." But as the immediate crisis faded, a new ordeal began. The legal battle for Emma's future. The state filed charges against Wayne Fletcher, including child endangerment, assault, and attempted abduction. At the same time, a court hearing was scheduled to determine Emma's guardianship and Max's fate. Tension swirled around the hearing like a summer thunderstorm. Could the court really separate Emma and Max after everything they'd survived? The courthouse was a century-old brick building, its walls thick with secrets and the scent of old books. On the morning of the hearing, Melissa dressed Emma in a yellow dress dotted with sunflowers, her favorite from the stack of donations, and let her bring Max's collar to hold for comfort. Max himself wore a clean bandage around his side, stitches barely visible under his thick fur. The waiting room was crowded, filled with lawyers, social workers, and a few curious townsfolk. At the center of it all, Emma sat silently beside Melissa, clinging to Max, her wide eyes reflecting a storm of fear and uncertainty. When their case was called, Melissa led Emma into the courtroom. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patricia Hargrove, peered over her glasses, reading through the stack of documents in front of her. She asked questions with brisk efficiency about Emma's mother, about Wayne's criminal history, about Melissa's qualifications as a foster parent. Janet Miller was called as a witness. She described in careful detail the night she found Emma, the state of the abandoned house, the bruises and silence, and, finally, Max's unwavering protection. "He's not just a dog, Your Honor," Janet said, her voice steady. "He's the reason Emma's alive today. I know, he saved her from much worse." Wayne's lawyer attempted to shift the narrative, insisting that Max was a threat and that Emma belonged with her biological family. But Wayne's record of violence and the chilling events at Melissa's house were hard to ignore. Then came Karen Wells, the social worker. She approached the witness stand, clutching a folder of Emma's drawings. "Emma has suffered severe trauma," she told the court. "She doesn't speak, not to adults, not to therapists, except she does communicate, through her art and through Max. When Max is with her, she's calmer, happier. He grounds her in a way no person has managed so far. I've worked with many children in foster care. I've never seen a bond like this." To further support the case, Dr. Lillian Pratt was called to the stand. "Your Honor, Max shows all the markers of a true therapy animal. He senses Emma's distress, interrupts her panic attacks, provides her a sense of security. I recommend he be allowed to stay with her as part of her treatment plan." Finally, Melissa spoke. Her hands trembled as she addressed the judge. "I know there's a lot of fear about dangerous dogs, but Max is not a danger to Emma. He's her protector. I'm asking the court to let me continue caring for both of them, together. If you separate them, you'll undo everything Emma's worked so hard to reclaim." The judge sat in silence for a long moment, looking at the little girl, the dog pressed against her side. Then she addressed Emma directly. "Emma, is there anything you want to say?" The courtroom held its breath. Emma looked down at Max, then at Judge Hargrove, her lips parting. Nothing came out at first. She shook her head, silent as ever. But then, just as the judge was about to move on, Emma whispered, a barely audible sound, but it was there. "Max stays." Gasps and tears rippled through the room. Melissa squeezed Emma's hand. Janet dabbed her eyes. Even Judge Hargrove's stern expression softened. She cleared her throat, composing herself. "I have reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the professional recommendations. I grant Melissa Barnes temporary guardianship of Emma Harris, and I hereby rule that Max is to remain by her side as her registered therapy animal. Mr. Fletcher will have no contact with Emma." The gavel's sharp crack ended the session, but the relief in the room lingered. Outside, reporters swarmed for comment, but Melissa shielded Emma and Max, ushering them quietly to the car. For the first time in months, Emma seemed lighter, as if the burden she carried had been eased by a few simple words. That evening, Melissa's house filled with supporters. Janet brought a bouquet of sunflowers. Karen delivered a scrapbook of Emma's drawings. now displayed like badges of courage. Jack Turner arrived with a medal Max had earned during his service, a bronze star, polished and gleaming. He fastened it to Max's collar, his voice thick with emotion. "You earned this, buddy. You really did." Word of the court's decision swept through Cedar Falls. Conversations changed. People who once called for Max's removal now dropped off treats and toys for both Emma and her dog. At the local animal shelter, applications for therapy animal adoption tripled in a week. As summer faded into fall, the little family at Maple Street focused on healing. Emma began to sleep through the night, her nightmares less frequent with Max by her side. She still struggled to speak, but sometimes, at bedtime, she would whisper to Max, soft words, secrets meant only for him. Melissa knew it would be a long road, but hope finally outweighed fear. In the quiet, golden light of late September, Emma smiled, really smiled, as she and Max walked together in the yard. Melissa watched from the porch, heart full, knowing that sometimes the smallest victories are the ones that mean the most. In the months that followed the courtroom victory, Cedar Falls was swept up in a tide of change. What began as whispers of fear and skepticism about Max's place in Emma's life soon transformed into a groundswell of support. Not just for the little girl and her dog, but for everyone in town who had ever felt like an outsider or an underdog. Melissa's front porch became a hub of community activity. Nearly every evening, someone would knock on the door, sometimes with a hot casserole, sometimes with a bag of toys, sometimes with nothing but a kind word or a quiet hug. The church ladies organized a welcome home party for Emma, decorating the backyard with colorful streamers and balloons. Veterans who'd served with Max's former handler, Daniel, dropped off framed photos and service medals, each one a tribute to the dog's courage and loyalty. At first, Emma was shy, overwhelmed by the attention and the noise. But Max was always there, a steady, calming presence. He seemed to sense when she was anxious and would nudge her hand with his nose, urging her back toward the circle of safety. Over time, Emma learned to trust the gentle kindness of her neighbors. She even started attending Sunday school, sitting in the back row with Max at her feet. The other children accepted the pair as if they had always belonged. The biggest change came at the town's annual Fall Festival, a tradition that brought together everyone from the oldest veterans to the youngest children. For years, the festival's dog show had been a simple affair, mostly local families showing off their pets' tricks. This year, Melissa and Emma were invited as special guests. The mayor himself asked Emma to present the ribbon for Best Rescue, and the crowd cheered when she timidly walked onto the stage, Max close at her side. As the sun dipped behind the trees and golden lights spilled over the fairgrounds, Emma did something no one expected. She whispered, "Max, let's go." And together they circled the show ring, the little girl with the battered dog moving in perfect step. For the first time, Emma felt the warmth of applause meant for her. Melissa wiped tears from her eyes. Janet, Karen, and Jack Turner stood in the crowd, hearts bursting with pride. The town's perception of Max shifted dramatically. Where once he'd been seen as a dangerous animal, he was now recognized as a local hero. The story of his bravery and devotion inspired a wave of animal adoptions at the local shelter. People who had never considered therapy animals began to ask questions, seeking out information on how dogs could help children heal. The shelter's adoption board filled up with photos of happy families and their new four-legged companions, many of whom had once been labeled problem dogs. Meanwhile, Emma's progress astonished everyone who knew her journey. She started to draw happier scenes, parks, playgrounds, bright sunrises with Max always by her side. The night terrors grew less frequent. She spoke more, first in whispers, then in soft, clear words. Her first real sentence, spoken one quiet morning as she watched Max nap in the sunbeam, was simply, "That's my best friend." Melissa wept with relief and joy. The adoption process moved quickly. Melissa, having proven her unwavering commitment, was granted full legal guardianship of Emma. The judge's order stated plainly that Max was to remain by Emma's side as her permanent therapy dog. The day the papers arrived, Melissa baked a cake and let Emma sign her name in crayon at the bottom of a family contract that hung proudly on the refrigerator. The media attention lingered for a while, drawing reporters from nearby towns and even a television crew from St. Louis. Emma didn't like the cameras, but Melissa allowed one interview with strict boundaries. The story that aired was tender and honest, highlighting not just the trauma, but the healing and the unique bond between a child and her dog. Cedar Falls itself became a symbol of what happens when a community comes together. Inspired by Emma and Max, local leaders pushed for changes in foster care policy, making it easier for children to be placed with their therapy animals. The animal shelter launched new outreach programs, connecting at-risk youth with adoptable pets. Fundraisers, art shows, and therapy workshops filled the town calendar, all sparked by the courage of a silent girl and her steadfast friend. One golden afternoon in late October, Emma stood in the backyard, leaves swirling around her feet. She turned to Max and whispered, "You saved me." For the first time, she smiled at Melissa and said, "Thank you for finding us." It was the first time she'd spoken to Melissa with such clarity, and the sound was sweeter than any music. That evening, Emma and Max took their first walk through the park alone. The air was crisp, the sky a deep blue. Children on bicycles waved as they passed, and a group of veterans saluted Max. Emma lifted her head and waved back, shy but proud, her hand resting on Max's back. In that simple, everyday act, a new chapter began, not just for Emma and Max, but for Cedar Falls itself. By the time the first frost covered the grass, Emma had found her voice. Max had found his forever home, and the whole town, changed by their journey, understood that true healing is never solitary. It's found in love, loyalty, and the small, brave steps forward that we take together. As the first snows dusted the lawns of Cedar Falls and the bright noise of autumn gave way to the hush of winter, Melissa often found herself looking back on the journey that had brought Emma and Max to her doorstep. She marveled at the way a story so full of heartbreak and trauma could become, with time and care, something beautiful, a living lesson in resilience, empathy, and the unbreakable bonds that heal the deepest wounds. Emma's transformation was never simple or easy. Healing, Melissa learned, did not move in straight lines. Some days, Emma ran through the house laughing, her hair streaming behind her, as Max chased her around the kitchen. On other days, a loud voice on TV or the slam of a car door sent her straight back into herself, eyes shadowed and shoulders tight. There were setbacks and regressions, bad dreams and sudden tears. But always, Max was there, his presence as constant as gravity. He understood her moods without a word, curling up beside her when she was anxious, nudging her to play when she was withdrawn. For Emma, safety wasn't a place. It was a living, breathing friend. Melissa noticed that the healing went both ways. Max, too, seemed to change with each passing week. He no longer flinched at sudden noises or paced the rooms at night. He slept deeply, content to sprawl in the middle of the living room while Emma drew pictures or watched cartoons. Sometimes he even played with other dogs at the park, his old wariness giving way to cautious joy. Watching them together, Melissa understood something vital. Both girl and dog had been broken by violence, and both had found their way back, not by erasing their scars, but by loving each other through them. Word of their progress continued to ripple through Cedar Falls. Dr. Pratt, Emma's therapist, invited other families to visit Melissa's home so their children could meet Max and see what patient, trauma-informed care looked like. Teachers from the elementary school asked Melissa to speak at workshops on childhood trauma, and Emma's art was displayed in the library, each drawing a testament to her journey from fear to hope. In one panel discussion at the town hall, Melissa and Karen Wells joined local advocates to talk openly about the challenges facing children in foster care. What Emma's story shows us, Karen told the room, is that trauma doesn't heal just because a child is safe. Healing takes time. It takes understanding. And sometimes it takes a friend, four-legged or otherwise, who refuses to give up. The discussion turned to Max and the idea of therapy animals. Dr. Hawkins, the animal behaviorist who'd worked with Emma, explained how animals can sense emotional pain, often before humans do. We still don't understand everything, he said, but what's clear is that, for many kids, an animal's love is the bridge back to trust. This sparked a broader debate in Cedar Falls. Should more foster kids have access to therapy animals? What kind of training should these animals receive? How do we support families like Melissa's, who take on such an enormous emotional burden? One night, after an especially moving community forum, Melissa sat on the porch with Janet Miller, Jack Turner, and Pastor Raymond. The air was cold, their breath visible in the glow of the porch light. Janet leaned forward, elbows on her knees. You know, I used to think the job ended when we took a kid out of a bad situation. But watching Emma, I see now that's just the start. Jack nodded, eyes glistening. Max never stopped fighting. Neither did Emma. It makes you wonder how many kids and dogs never get their second chance. Pastor Raymond sipped his coffee and said, "This town needed their story. It reminded us what we're supposed to be about. Stepping up, standing by each other, believing the best is possible, even when it seems lost." Cedar Falls, once divided by suspicion and fear, was now united by purpose. The outpouring of support for Emma and Max created a ripple effect. Local businesses launched fundraising campaigns for trauma-informed resources at the school. The animal shelter partnered with therapy organizations, training unadoptable dogs to work with kids facing similar struggles. Volunteers formed a support group for foster families, offering meals, rides, and an ear to listen. Through it all, Melissa saw firsthand how healing never happened in isolation. The kindness of neighbors, the dedication of professionals, the wisdom of friends. All these pieces fit together to create a safety net strong enough to catch Emma and Max when they faltered. Perhaps the greatest lesson, though, was the power of empathy. Those who'd once feared Max now greeted him with smiles, having seen how his love saved a little girl's life. Those who'd pitied Emma now looked to her for inspiration, learning that courage is not loud or flashy, but persistent and quiet. The choice to keep going, to keep hoping, even after the worst has happened. Late one night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, Melissa sat in the quiet living room, her hand resting on Max's big head. She thought about all the children in the world who still waited for someone to see them, to fight for them, to stay by their side through the dark nights. She knew that their story was only one among thousands. But if sharing it helped even one person believe in second chances, it was worth every tear, every sleepless night. In the end, Emma and Max's journey was not just about escaping the past. It was about learning to live with it, to make meaning out of pain, and to trust that love, in all its forms, could mend what had been broken. Cedar Falls had changed because of them. Policies had shifted, hearts had opened, and the town itself had grown a little kinder. As Melissa turned out the light, she glanced one last time at the family photo on the mantel. Emma's bright eyes, Max's goofy grin, and herself, arms wrapped around them both. It was a snapshot of survival, yes, but more than that, it was a promise. Healing is possible, and no one should have to walk that path alone. Spring arrived in Cedar Falls with a flourish, blooming dogwoods, warm breezes, and the promise of new beginnings. After the long, hard winter, life seemed to stretch awake, filled with possibility. In the small house on Maple Street, sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, illuminating the little family that had weathered so much and somehow, together, survived. Emma was changing every day. The girl who once huddled behind Max's fur, eyes wide and haunted, now moved through the world with gentle confidence. She spoke more, sometimes quietly, sometimes in sudden bursts, her voice surprising even herself. She laughed often, her laughter bright and contagious. At school, she made her first real friends, kids who loved her for her quick smile and her knack for drawing animals, especially brave, loyal dogs. Max had grown older, but he carried himself with the dignity of a hero. His limp was slight now, his coat shiny and soft. On walks through the park, children raced to greet him, eager to stroke his fur and hear Emma proudly introduce him. "This is Max, he's my family." There was a time when Emma's story, and Max's, had been a secret, hidden behind silence and shame. Now they shared their past without fear, knowing the power of honesty and the importance of being seen. Melissa still marveled at it all. She'd taken Emma and Max into her home hoping only to offer safety, but they'd given her something even greater: purpose, connection, and proof that hope could be reborn from heartbreak. She watched Emma plant sunflowers in the backyard. Max sprawled nearby in the grass and thought, "We're not just surviving, we're living." As the months rolled on, Cedar Falls remained forever changed by the journey of the girl and her dog. Stories of their resilience became the backbone of new community efforts: a trauma-informed training program for teachers, a foster parent support group, and a town-wide fundraiser that established scholarships for kids in foster care and funded animal therapy programs at the local shelter. Even those who had once feared Max came around, bringing treats for him on holidays and thanking Melissa for believing in second chances. At the annual Cedar Falls Community Picnic, Melissa was invited to speak. She stood before neighbors, friends, teachers, and even strangers who had followed Emma and Max's journey in the news. Her voice shook with emotion as she shared what she had learned. "Emma and Max showed us that scars are not the end of a story. Sometimes they're just the place where the light gets in. We all carry invisible wounds. But when we come together, with patience, kindness, and trust, we make healing possible, for ourselves and for each other." Emma, shy but radiant, stood beside her. Max wore a blue ribbon on his collar. The crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation. It was not just applause for surviving the past, but for the courage it took to keep moving forward. There were quiet moments, too, lessons whispered in the soft spaces of everyday life. Melissa saw how Max comforted Emma after a hard day, how Emma reached out to classmates who seemed lonely, how the town pulled together for families in crisis. She realized that true heroism was rarely loud or dramatic. It lived in small acts of empathy, in the willingness to sit with someone's pain, to listen, and to stay. As spring ripened into summer, Emma and Max created new traditions. Every Sunday, they walked to the park with Melissa, pausing at the bench dedicated to the silent bond, a plaque honoring their journey and the town's promise to never turn away a child or animal in need. Emma traced her fingers over the letters, remembering a time when hope seemed impossible. Now she looked to the future with bright eyes, her faith in people and in herself restored. Melissa sometimes found herself reflecting late at night, after Emma was asleep and Max snored softly at her feet. She thought about the many children and animals still waiting for a chance, the families struggling in silence, the neighbors who might need a gentle word or a helping hand. She knew their story wasn't unique, but it was a reminder that hope is a collective effort, something built day by day through courage and compassion. For Cedar Falls, the lesson was clear. Quiet heroes walk among us, sometimes human, sometimes canine. They show up, they protect, they comfort, they change lives, often without expecting thanks or recognition. What matters is not how loudly we shout, but how deeply we care. Melissa ended every talk with the same words, her own personal call to action. If you ever doubt the power of love, trust, or the quiet loyalty of a dog, let our story remind you, there's hope, even after the storm. In the end, Emma and Max's journey was more than a story of survival. It was about reclaiming joy, building trust, and choosing connection over isolation. It was about believing in second chances and creating a world where no one, no matter how broken, is ever truly alone. One warm afternoon, as the sun set in streaks of gold and pink, Emma took Max for a walk through the heart of town. Melissa watched from the porch, heart full, as the pair moved forward together, strong and unafraid. For Cedar Falls, and for everyone who heard their story, it was a reminder that healing is always possible. But it takes all of us. And if you're listening, if you're wondering what you can do, remember, kindness changes everything. Be that quiet hero. Stand up for the voiceless. Reach out. Because sometimes the smallest, quietest voices, like a little girl and her brave dog, have the most to teach us all.